Welcome to Science for Hire with your host, Dr. Charles Handler. Science for Hire provides 30 minutes of enlightenment on best practices and news from the front lines of the employment testing universe.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Science for Hire. I am your host, Dr. Charles Handler, and today I got a double shot here, two guests that are great collaborators together and with others as well. And both of these guests have the distinction of being alumnus, I guess, with two of you, it's alumnus of the podcast. And Bas van der Hat, that was butchery. He's going to tell you how to pronounce it correctly. But he's got the all-time award of the third time on the show. And you'd think after 3 times I could pronounce his last name right, but such is not the case. And Kevin Wheeler, whom I've known for, 20 plus years at least, has been a great friend of mine over the years and always somebody who has a great perspective on things. So I'm going to let you guys, and we're here today not only to just chew the, digital fat about recruiting and recruiting in this crazy age of unprecedented technology, but also for them to promote and talk about their new book, Talent Acquisition Excellence. And so I want to give them an opportunity to talk about that. They are both excellent at talent acquisition, and their wisdom is going to be super enjoyable and valuable for everybody. So let's go ahead and kick off some intros. Bas, tell us.
So my name is Bas van der Hatert, and there's no problem that no Englishman has ever pronounced that name correctly. It's as Dutch as it gets. And I am, as you know, a consultant on all things talent acquisition and mainly on selection. And I also run a research on corporate careers websites. And I am very honored that Kevin allowed me to write a book together with him, which started in the pandemic and took us a little longer to finish than we ever thought we would. And so, let's talk about talent acquisition excellence and everything which has to do with the new ways we're going to recruit in the near future.
Cool. And Kevin, you're up.
Well, thanks, Charles. It's always great to see you and be on your podcast. I run the Future of Talent Institute, which is a think tank. Basically, we try to look at the future trends that are having an impact on all things talent. We try to look out a couple of years if we can, look at the trends and just see what is going to shape the future of our industry. And obviously, right now, it's artificial intelligence and automation, which is a huge part of this. And that's what we talk about pretty significantly in our book, Talent Acquisition Excellence. Great to be here.
Cool. Very good. Yeah, let's talk about that. Kevin, you may not remember, and I'll be honest, I didn't remember until I was cleaning out my office that you and I did a book together 22 years ago or something like that about
Really?
about assessment. Yeah, I wanted to see if I had it on my bookshelf. I think it's at home because I was unpacking stuff from the attic. While we're talking, I'll call up some historical information here and see if I can find the name of it. It's probably not really available in a lot of places, but I'll do it. So awesome. So Kevin's in California, Bas is in the Netherlands. So we've got, and I'm in the middle of it all here. So we got different time zones. So thanks for making some time. And I'm just going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Before we get into the book and all that kind of stuff, I want to see each of you guys, what's your number one thing? If you just had to leave, less is more. If you had to leave our listeners with one thing they need to be aware of and think about for the future of recruiting, what is it?
I think it's pretty clear that artificial intelligence is about to change everything that we know about recruiting. And I think the most important thing for recruiters is to understand that a lot of what they do right now is going to be done by automation for them, and they're going to have to develop new skills to be effective and survive.
Well put. Well put. All right, Bas, what do you got for us? can't say the same thing as Kevin either. Well, I guess you could.
Of course not. But no, what I think and what I hope also people will read in the book is what we try to emphasize a lot of times is there is no one way to do recruitment right. There are many ways to do it right, but even more ways to do it badly or completely wrong.
Yeah.
We use several models. Kevin has put several models in there. Some are complementary to each other, some are actually contradictory. But that's because for some forms of recruitment, you need one thing. For others, you might need another. And it needs to be fitting with your corporate culture. So I think the one thing is there is no one way, one right way. There are several really good ways to do it. But then again, not taking a specific route is the way to not do it right.
Yeah. And I remind myself of this all the time because it applies to me. I break a lot of stuff, but it's a lot easier to break something than it is to unbreak something. I found that to be pretty true, right? So it's good to understand that unbreaking things is hard, and so get it right the first time as much as you can. And that's one of I think the most frustrating things over my career, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that has that frustration, is that when we get into organizations to do an intervention, we may see a lot of things that need to be changed to get at the core that we want to change or to really get them in the right direction. And sometimes it's just too seismic because you've had all these different technology systems that have been put in place over the years. And, people are heavily invested politically in the various things that have been set up. And it is hard to unknot stuff and get your agenda through. And Kevin, I'm sure this has happened to you 1,000 times more than me, but you can also come in with a lot of wisdom, and Bas too, you can come in with a lot of wisdom and say, here's my expert opinion on the things you need to do. And they pay you, say thank you very much, and don't do any of it. So you have that happening too,
It's all about change management, I mean, change is something that none of us like. We all are very comfortable where we are right now. And change is very rarely does anybody embrace significant change in their life, right? So it's something you have to be forced into, something that we really have to be kicked in the butt to do, or have some leader or somebody who says this is what you're going to do, even though you hate it. But change just doesn't happen when you say, "Oh, come on, Charles, do it this way," okay? That's just not going to work. Unfortunately, that's one of the lessons that I think you learn when you study change management.
And I think one of the other things we need to realize is in most cases when processes are broken, whatever it is, technology isn't going to fix the broken process. It's just going to emphasize the broken process. And that's another thing I hope that we try to really emphasize in the book, that technology is amazing and we're living in a time of unprecedented technological change. But if we don't have a working process, if our strategy, if our processes aren't right, you're not going to fix it with another technology layer yet again.
Yeah. And throwing AI at something is, AI is not a solution, it's a component. So Kevin, I did find here, we published this in Global Learning Resources, which is your company, screening and assessment best practices. So that was 2001. And I'm thinking about it as we talk about change and change management. I bet though, if I go back, I know I have a copy of that book. I bet the best practices, the basic best practices for assessment, have not changed really at all. Now, for the bigger context of it, yeah, probably they have. And that's a different episode, probably. I don't want to get too assessment focused here because you all bring a nice broader perspective. So what led you all to, to decide, hey, well, we got to write a book and, let's do it. Tell us about that process a little bit.
Well, truth is, it started early in the pandemic, and basically, we are both public speakers. So I reached out to Kevin like, well, what the hell are you doing with all his time except drinking more like me? And shall we do something useful with it? And shall we finally write a book? That was basically the first thing. Like, let's have something to focus on during this pandemic when we're both stuck at home and not standing on podia inspiring people. Let's find a different way to inspire people. That was basically the start of it all.
You know, there's a real need I felt, and I think Bas and I both felt, for spreading the word really about what's coming. And I think a lot of people are just not really aware. You know, they kind of hear about this or that, and they see an app or a tool, but they don't put the big picture together. They don't connect the dots. And I think one of the things we try to do in the book is just connect all the dots together and show what could happen. You know, that's really I guess that's the core theme of the book, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and using the Kevin's strategic thinking, you know, the broader concepts, the stuff that the global TA leaders can roll out. I'm usually more on a tactical level, like with the regional TA directors, like how does that work out in the Netherlands? You know, what are specific case studies? And I think we really made it accessible for the broad TA community, not just the top leaders, not just the bottom, but basically we've put something in there for everybody. And what I personally really enjoyed, and I don't know about you, Kevin, was our discussions about, yeah, that's amazing for the US, but that doesn't work in Europe. And then you're like, yeah, it's really funny that you say that, but the US doesn't do it that way. So we also made it like a global book.
Yeah.
with
And that I think is a big defining characteristic. We talk about Europe, we talk about Asia. It's not just U.S. centric, and 90% of the books that I get are either UK or U.S. centric in their thinking, right?
Yeah. Well, global's great. And, I was just thinking, Kevin, specifically, Boss, when you were saying about kind of being stuck at home. I mean, Kevin, what's the book? And I'm not going to equate you to the actual, it's not a book, it's a movie. It could have been a book. I'm not going to equate you to the actual characters, like what he's doing besides that the George Clooney movie In the Air. I don't know, where he's like flying all the time. He never stops flying. So that's what I think about. Kevin's constantly in motion going somewhere. So you must have felt like a caged animal during the pandemic, or gotten into gardening like I did.
Well, I got into lots of stuff. I got more into my photography, which I love. I spent a lot more time doing that, and yeah, I did do some gardening, and I did cooking. I did stuff that I've never done before, but yeah, it was a bit like a caged animal. But in a way, it was kind of good because yeah, I think it was just a good time to take a pause.
It really did offer us, those opportunities, whether we wanted it or not. For me, I think the the biggest challenge I had was doing remote schooling with my, at that time, like kindergarten kid. I have trouble paying attention. A 5-year-old or 6-year-old, whatever, definitely has trouble paying attention. And I found myself wanting to goof off and cut up just like my kid was. And he's taking French immersion, so it was in French, a lot of it. Yeah, it was challenging, but fun, I guess. I mean, I worked from my own office for 20 years, so that part of it wasn't too limiting. And Boss, what about you? I don't know anything about your hobbies or anything. I know you're renovating a part of your house with your dad, but like, what did you do to pass the time besides bugging Kevin about writing a book?
well, it's
That was a full-time job.
Yeah, I bet.
yeah, yeah. That was actually quite a job for chasing down Kevin. They say you revert back to kindergarten at a certain age. Well, I felt like I was chasing a toddler down sometimes. But no, the renovation actually came after, and it's actually finished now. But no, it's. I mean, I've done lots of stuff. I cycled an insane amount. It's. I always loved being on my bike, and now there weren't speeches to prepare, there weren't events to organize, there wasn't international travel to do. So yeah, I spend a lot of time just working out?
Yeah. So book, we got a kind of basic thing. I've skimmed it. I'll admit I haven't read it. That there's a lot of layers in there, a lot of levels of detail for the macro all the way down to, hey, this is some specific stuff. So it's a playbook, and I think written by two real experts. And Kevin, you kind of gave us the entree into, hey, all this stuff is going to change, and you combine that with what Bas is saying of, hey, if you don't do it right, the first time, it's harder even to go back and change. So if you think about the combination of those two things, what we're saying is let's think pretty hard about the future and technology before we jump into it. And I can tell you, I wonder what you guys' opinion is. So I'm doing a little project where I'm surveying, having interviews with IOs that run large scale assessment programs at global companies about how they're using technology. And pretty much everybody is in the, hey, we need to wait and see about this, even though it's moving fast. We don't necessarily want to jump in with both feet so quickly and then realize we made mistakes, etc. The hard part about that is it's changing so fast that if you don't choose a point to jump in, there's always going to be that thing in front of you of this is an unknown. But what have both your experiences been working with talent acquisition functions? I'm sure the questions have to be, as they are to me when I do that work, what should we be doing about this? So what would you tell someone who asked you that, Kevin?
Well, I think we all have this idea that we're going to wait for some finished product to appear that we can just sort of plug into whatever we're doing. And
Not a
I think
Swedish
that's,
product. It sounded like
pardon
you
me,
said finished. It sounded like you said finished. So I was like, what about a
a finished
Swedish?
product. Yeah,
What
we
about
want
a
to we
Swedish?
want to we want to tried,
Snoop.
tested, and true project that we can throw into place. And the reality is that we're in an era of experimentation. We have to experiment continuously, right? So you're going to have to try something, with a set of goals in mind, and if they don't achieve those goals, figure out why and try something else. So I mean, whenever you're in a time of change like this, the only way to get through it is to be constantly experimenting and exploring alternatives. All right. And if you're familiar with Dave Snowden in the UK, who's written the Cynefin framework, and he talks a lot about this. When you're in an era of uncertainty, of chaos, basically, the only way out of it is to experiment and try different approaches until you find one that works. So, to me, the whole idea that, human nature is that I'm just going to wait till somebody makes the product that I can buy that will do whatever I need. And that's probably not going to happen in your lifetime. Right. So, we're in a tremendous era of innovation and exploration. And whether it's Chat GTP or whatever it is, tomorrow it's going to be completely different than it is today. So you have to be willing to experiment.
Gotcha. So what have you had any of your clients, of course you don't have to name name, have you been involved in any experimentation with anything that's super interesting that you felt like, wow, this is pretty cool. I'm glad these people are willing to do this. We really are going to learn a lot, or learn that we don't want to do this, or whatever it is.
It's kind of a little bit like medical science. You want to introduce a new drug, but you don't want to kill anybody, right? You want new techniques, but you don't want to, leave them permanently disabled, right? And I think it's the same in recruiting. We want to try new things, but we don't want to have bias or prejudice. We don't want to hire the wrong people. We don't want to get in trouble legally. So you're kind of in the rock and the hard place, right? When you're in recruiting. And I think that's part of the problem, that, you just can't throw any old solution out there. You have to have some guidelines and rails around it and understand the ethics behind what you're doing and inform people about what you're doing. And present it as an experiment. So whether you're using, let's say, you're using Chat GTP to a chatbot to screen people, tell them what you're doing. Tell them, I'm going to use this chatbot. We're trying it out to see and get your feedback on it, right? So be open and honest about your experimentation, and don't try to hide it or cover it up or expect that it's going to be perfect. It's not. It's not yet. It's going to take years before we're going to get to the point where we can just turn the chatbot loose, right? So, I mean, it's really a matter of just having a common sense, practical approach to what you're doing and keep people informed and be transparent about what you're doing. I think that's really the key to it.
Yeah. So, Bas, have you had an opportunity to advise on or get involved with a really interesting use of technology in talent acquisition or recruitment that you feel is, hey, our book kind of supports this. This is really something that, I think has a lot of opportunities.
Well, I've seen some yeah. We've at some organizations, for example, we took last phase assessments to first phase assessments. So instead of assessing basically the candidate we already decided we were going to hire, but we needed, to check off for legal reasons that an external assessor agreed on it, we moved it all the way up front, which was an interesting experiment, which had eventually some downsides, but the idea was good, the execution a little less. I was recently very much on the sidelines, but involved in uh, an organization which thought they were going to use an, let's call it an AI-based tool on assessing somebody's willingness or desire to work at that specific organization. Turned out that wasn't the big factor what made somebody successful, and which is actually also very much rooted in the book. Go back to your core. In their case, they were used to, that their entire culture was build your own, hire graduates, train them up, etc., etc. So now they're moving towards something which fits that culture, which is hire on potential, but actually take the assessment data with you on the future development trajectories of, the graduates, something which they did back in the day before we actually had really great assessments, or we didn't assess them that well. And then for some reason they lost their way, and now they're going back to their original culture of hiring for potential, graduate, training people, and internal mobility, which is basically what we keep saying in the book all the time as well. Make sure that your talent acquisition strategy fits your corporate culture, your DNA.
Talent acquisition has become more and more marketing too, right? I mean, you got to have a recruitment marketing function. And when you marketing, hopefully you're talking about the essence of your company and what value you have to the world and to your prospective employees and customers as well, right? So employees or job applicants, and hopefully employees too, and customers these days should be one and the same, right? And so you need to have that attitude, in my opinion, anyway, that you need to serve your recruits, with the same care and feeding as you do. And that, I mean, that should have been the mantra for hundreds of years. I don't know how much it really has been, but it should be.
First, you have to know, Charles, what you stand for. What is your culture? You said you need recruitment marketing telling what it is you want, or what type of people you want, what your culture is. The thing is, especially in major big organizations, which we see now, and the organizations only got bigger and merged, etc., and there are so many departments with so many different cultures. I mean, I've been inside several of the big four accounting firms, and I can tell you their merger and acquisition team and their fiscal teams have a completely different culture, but they also even agree on core values sometimes. So it's amazing what you can communicate and how you can basically get people to apply. You can treat them like customers, but then if the product you sold just doesn't fit reality, you're still gonna go completely wrong.
I mean, there really is no such thing as corporate culture, in my opinion, really. It's
Yeah.
every department, every division, and even every hiring manager has their own culture, right? Subculture, if you want to call it that. There may be some overarching values that a company has. But to your original point about marketing, I mean, absolutely, it's essential. I mean, we've got a lot of things going on. You've got a younger generation of workers who really don't want to work for corporations,
Yeah, I know.
not not their primary desire. We've got fewer and fewer university graduates now. I just read an article, out of 100 graduates of a university, only 5 will actually work in the field they studied, which is shocking and amazing. And that's in the U.S. I think, but I think it also applies to some degree everywhere. So if you're a company and you want to attract the really hard to find skills, you've got to market. Otherwise, they're not going to even know that you're desirous of having them, right? So marketing is just a core element, and that may be the essence of talent recruitment, of talent acquisition, where a lot of the routine stuff can be automated, but the marketing strategy and messaging is not something that's going to be automated right away.
Yeah. Well, one important note, maybe it's a little side note, but values, work values, corporate values, and corporate culture are not the same thing, right? I mean, you have, examples like I've worked for companies where innovation is one of their core missions, and they absolutely do bring innovative things in. Is that really the same as culture? Maybe there's some overlap, but in the psychology world, they're not necessarily the same. But the words, there's some similarity, and the words get batted around, meaning basically the same thing. And without real standardization of what we mean, sometimes it's hard to speak in absolutes, right?
That's actually why we made definitions of what we mean with certain terms when it comes to marketing, culture, DNA, etc. in the book. And we describe, like, this is what we call your brand DNA. This is what we describe as your employee value proposition. This is then we defined those terms and then said, how do you deal with them? And then said, which technology can support you using them. That's basically how we went about this, because we had so many discussions about this during the writing of the book that at some point we were like, yeah, let's just write down a definition here of what we mean, and then people can argue about our definition, but at least it's clear that what we wrote down was based on that definition.
Yeah, part of my training has always been to, operationally define any term. I mean, we're just so ingrained with that I typically do that too. Well, what about some stories? Have either one of you all been like had a client? I'll just open it up because there's various scenarios, but have you been involved or had any discussions with actual end users about a really kind of wacky or from an AI and a basically, computational perspective, whatever? Have you all been and discussed or been involved with or whatever, some really stuff that you're like 5 years ago, there's no way we would have even seen this, or this is a glimpse into the future. I'm so happy to be talking about it now, or it could even be a disaster where you're like, oh my God, if the client tried that, I don't want to be any part of it. Right. So anyway, so stories from the front lines, man. What do you got?
Well, I think one that I like is what some of the RPOs are doing, and that's the recruitment process outsourcing companies that basically do recruiting for corporations. And I think partly because they're for profit and they have a revenue stream that they can invest in technology, they have really pioneered the development of some pretty exciting and interesting use of technology in recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
For them, it's a financial advantage to help them, reduce the number of people they need to do something and increase their profit margins. So it's been very successful. They've introduced some modules now that are even companies can buy standalone from not buying the RPO service, just buy the technology. So there's some really interesting things going on in that space, and I think that's going to continue to grow over the next few years. And a lot of companies are adopting that technology.
Yeah. So automation, Kevin, is that what you're talking about? Mostly automation?
Yeah, it's automating like a part of the process, not the whole process.
Sure.
But for example, it's helping streamline sourcing and the initial screening of candidates, and taking that workload off of the recruiters.
Gotcha. Bas, what do you got for us?
Well, one of the cases which I at least found interesting, I'm still not sure if it's from a bias perspective, if I completely agree with it, but was They don't care that much about bias in that part of the region, of that part of the world, which was actually, it's in the book, Emirates Airways. And they get so many customer support applicants, basically, because they hire internationally. They were doing video interviews, and they basically trained an algorithm on who would the recruiter select and who wouldn't the recruiter select. And they build a linguistic. I know you recently had a linguistics professor in your
Yep.
podcast as well. They build a based on the the words they used, and they managed to match those with being service oriented, which a customer service rep needs to be. And they were now able to, I think, automatically select about 1/3 of all the applicants, and they simply got a job without a recruiter ever saying yes to them. So they saved tons on recruiters looking at videos. They were auto rejecting a lot of people also because of the quality of English.
Yeah.
And so basically, I think they had like 1/3 of all the people only needed to be reviewed by humans. That was an interesting case study.
Yeah.
And like I said, and there are several others which I recently came across an IT firm which hired graduates, upskilled them, and put them at big corporations, and they were able to by using data analysis over certain assessment technology, they were able to define which type of IT job fits you. You know, they were still depending on an IT a diploma, so you had to finish college, which is quite normal in the Netherlands and not as expensive as in the US. And they now had a 95% accuracy, not only on saying this is, you're better of a software engineer, you're a project lead, you're a scrum master, but also putting them in specific companies, because they know, like at this accounting firm, we know this specific skill is overrated, so people who are great at this need to go there. And here we have a building society, and they overemphasize on certain skills, and they said we now have a 95% satisfaction rate from our customers on the people we place.
Cool. That sounds awesome. Yeah, I think. Well, I know on the thing you're talking about for Emirates, that's really interesting. I'm working on a product idea right now that's similar but has some more dimensions, which has been really fun because I'm starting to get into learning how would I train models like this. And well, the first thing I learned is I need to hire somebody else, but at least I'm understanding, like, the big picture of it, which is fun, and actually, Bas, you've been real help to me just in my work tracking the market and stuff. The number of vendors in the Netherlands selling predictive hiring tools and some of the more interesting use cases, to me, is really, it's notable because you don't have many other countries. The US and the UK have the most of these type of firms, and there's at least 5 or 6 I can think of from the Netherlands. They're doing some interesting things, and a lot of those things I think, while they're laudable, it'd be hard to get those done in the US. Some of them are sketchy, whatever it is. But we're starting to see, I think, more and more new models that can be scary to people, worried about risk, et cetera. And, that's a viable thing. Obviously, there's across the board, there's ethical considerations that are happening that they're not happening fast enough to keep up, but I mean, Kevin, have you worked with clients who are really concerned and, kind of advising them on how do we make sure we're building an ethical, platform here? Seems like something you'd be into.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, most of the clients are very wary of using the technology, both from a personal inclination and because their legal department is, breathing down their neck around the legality of using some of these tools. So what I'm finding is the large companies are very slow to pick up on this because of those concerns that they have. I find that a lot more experimentation is happening in the small companies that don't worry so much about these things or don't have big legal departments. So there's several really interesting end-to-end automated recruitment solutions that I've looked at recently. They pretty much promise to do everything from sourcing to right up to presenting them to the hiring manager, and they're very good. They seem to be quite well designed, but there's no big company that's going to use those tools today, right? It's just too much of a risk. So smaller companies are definitely experimenting, and I think, like most things in life, the little guys that do all the the early stage learning and discovering and testing. So I don't expect I'm going to see, other than maybe an IBM, where it just has a huge infrastructure and ability to do this kind of thing. But other than a company like that, you're not going to see a lot of big companies doing really exciting, innovative stuff on a big scale. They may do it on a small scale or certain things, but, and they get worried. I mean, they get scared, like the Amazon case, which still, even though that was years ago, where Amazon, had an algorithm that was selecting only men for jobs because the data they trained it on was only male oriented. So the algorithm thought that they only wanted men. And even though that's
which they actually never went live with, and they still got blamed for it. They actually had, that was one of the very few times they had a great auditing system, and they killed the project because they saw this happening, and now they still get blamed for it. So I understand that people don't want to experiment anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
they get very scared.
Yeah, you end up with a stigma, like HireVue. You still find people that are concerned about facial recognition, etc. This is not a commercial for them, but they actually, first of all, that was a small percentage of their algorithm from the beginning, and now it's completely removed. But they still bear the scars in the marketplace of that kind of thing. So you do have to think about what you're doing and make it long lasting. And with ChatGTP too, I mean, you can't really have enterprise level systems that are utilizing ChatGTP as the large language model engine without a lot of risks. That's why I think people will take an open source and train it, to on their own closed data set, which is we're seeing, more and more being able to leverage that, because ChatGTP is one large language model. There's millions of them out there. So what I'm curious, what's your, I wouldn't call it guilty pleasure, but what's the thing that you might think you shouldn't admit that you use ChatGTP for, right? I'll tell mine. I'll start out with mine, and then you guys can tell yours or make something up if you want. But for me, I've had like in my filing cabinet a kid's book that I wanted to write for a really, really long time. And I had a basic story idea, but never written one of those, didn't know how to execute it. And I'm still doing it, working with ChatGTP has been a real resource. It's not writing it for me, but it's telling me I can research things. It helps me break things down into, what's the right format, et cetera. And so I've been able to move the ball forward, quite a bit. So I'm not afraid to admit that. That's something that I'm doing. I don't know when that book will be out. I don't want to talk about it much more because I want to do it before I talk about it. But what about you guys? Don't be afraid.
No, well, it's actually, I'm a pro. I've got a pro account for ChatGPT these days, and I'm actually loving using DALL-E, which is the picture engine of ChatGPT, way too much. So I use it a lot for getting photos into the white papers I write on all kinds of topics. I stopped buying stock photos, and now DALL-E is generating everything. And then in the evenings, I'm using DALL-E to make pictures of groups of friends that I have, friends that play in bands, and ask ChatGPT if it knows the band, and create images in Van Gogh style stuff like for the bands. That's one of that recently I got asked by my friends to please stop posting those photos.
Yeah,
it's
you did one of me
now.
And Kevin and I before the thing, and it didn't look so. I had the glasses. Kevin didn't. Kevin, you look fantastic in that thing. You look like a Hollywood
I wish I looked
star. And I look very
20-year-old.
distinguished, I would say, but I think it might have gotten. Anyway, I use DALL-E all the time too. It is awesome and hilarious. And I just went to the GTP store, which is now available. And I think one of the things that'll be really interesting with that, I also entered in hiring. Just what GTPs have people built for hiring? There's so many of them. You go to futurepedia.ai, I think it is. That's a tracking of all the different, stuff people have been building as well. You put hiring in there, there's literally hundreds of apps. So you could imagine recruiter just going renegade saying, oh, I'm going to use this, cool GPT tool somebody built to do X, Y, or Z, and with no understanding of the quality or anything like that. But those are also good for things like DALL-E. Like I had one, I asked it to break down my writing style and articulate it so it could. I wanted to see, could it write a blog in my own voice, which it failed at. But because I'm a little complicated as a writer. But what about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I use it for research all the time. I mean, it's just become my new Google, I guess you could call it, where I just, ask it when I'm writing one of my articles or, one of my columns. I just, if there's a question about a figure, a date, a data point, can you give me an example of somebody that's done X, Y, or Z? It's been really, really helpful for that. So I think for me, it's primarily been used for research and informing me about things or looking up stuff that otherwise would take me forever, to find in other ways. Who said this and what book, things like this. And it really quickly identifies the author or whatever for me. And boy, it just saves tons of time.
It's incredible.
Oh, sorry, maybe one of the cool things to end on is also, we actually, in the book, and our publisher denied it, so it's in a frame now, but we actually asked ChatGPT to write the introduction of the chapter on ethics on AI. And so, and it came back with a really great ethical debate on using artificial intelligence and or the privacy concerns, the writing credit concerns, and everything else that goes with it. So we actually, we were forbidden by the publisher to use AI generated content in the book, except for saying up front there was AI generated content, but we actually played around with letting AI write certain parts of the book, but we had to
don't deep fake your readers now. Come on. That's the thing. I just played around with the text to video. I posted on LinkedIn today, although this will air a month but later. But it's called NVIDIA, I think, or NVIDIO. And I did one prompt, and it creates a video for you. I've asked it different times to take a voice of a narrator. So this one I asked it to take the voice of a squirrel. So it made the whole video about squirrels, and the squirrel's voice was actually a British male, but the whole video about hiring was just narrated, but it just had pictures of squirrels doing stuff. And so, that was one prompt. I know you can work with it more, but that's going to be, a future that we're going to end up with. I could even imagine that somebody taking a video interview and deep faking having a text to video person, or just even having a video avatar answer the questions for them. So we're getting into a crazy new world when it comes, to all this stuff, and we're all going to experience that together, and there'll be some laughs and some cries probably with it all, but we can't stop it at this point. So as we play out of here, question for you to both answer. Start with you, Kevin. So what if a talent leader came to you and said, where should I put my money right now? Where should I invest? Given all the stuff that's going on, what should I invest? And that could be technology, it could be planning, whatever it is. What would you advise them to do?
I think a good entry point to starting to use technology effectively is screening candidates, the initial screening of candidates. And I think that the tools are fairly good now that do that. There's lots of them, which I'm sure you are well aware of. And if you have a good, accurate job description that is actually what the hiring manager is looking for, I think you can do extremely good job of screening out candidates that just are not qualified or not going to fit that bill. Yeah. So to me, the sweet spot to start would be in that initial screening process and even some of the assessment process. The other area that I think is being used by some clients, some of my clients, is using ChatGPT to help rewrite job descriptions and make them more effective. That's done with human oversight, obviously, but You take a very boring job description and you ask GTP to make it more interesting or whatever. It's doing a pretty good job at that. So there are definitely areas where I think TA leaders can start to use the technology effectively, and those are two areas.
I would actually start at the job description and probably not use ChatGPT, but an actual trained tool for it. The best results I ever got at companies is by implementing tools like Textio and just writing inclusive and amazing job descriptions just to attract the right talent, which, as Kevin says, is also then the base for a better pre-screening tool. Because if you don't know what you're hiring for, then how the hell can you screen on it? And the other thing I would definitely look at, even though it's probably not there yet, is internal mobility. See if you can get AI to identify the best people within your organization, or maybe even within your ATS, a CRM system, your candidate CRM system, who are fit for the job. But the very first thing I would advise every talent leader to do right now is have a policy on candidates using AI to apply. Because whatever you do, and I'm not saying you should allow it or not allow it, but whatever you do, you can't leave it up to the recruiter and the hiring manager to decide what to do with it. You need a policy, and you need it yesterday.
So while we were talking, I just I just prompted ChatGTP. I said, write a job description for your job, because we were talking about that. So I can't read the whole thing because it wrote a lot, but the job title is AI language model assistant. The location is virtual online, and the job type is full-time, 24/7 availability. And just reading the job description. As a ChatGTP AI language model assistant, you will be responsible for engaging in conversations with a wide variety of users, answering queries, providing information, generating creative content, and assisting with problem-solving tasks. You will operate in a text-based environment and handle requests spanning numerous topics and domains, and your goal will be to provide accurate, relevant, and timely responses, ensuring a high-quality user experience. I mean, it's pretty funny here. There's a lot of stuff in the middle I won't bore you guys with, but the final thing is, note this position does not require physical presence, travel, or traditional office hours, as the AI operates in a virtual environment accessible worldwide. It's not many people that could meet that job description, but sounds like a perfect job description for ChatGTP, you know.
I was going to say, it sounds like a job description for a robot or a bot. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
well, that's what it is for sure. Don't let it tell you otherwise, although it will always tell you that. So great. What a good conversation as always with you all. Again, we didn't even, we scraped into topics that we could spend all day talking about, you know, and there's just so many, that's the thing that's happening to me. I get overloaded, overwhelmed. I'm just constantly, I feel like I'm caught up in this thing because I'm really into this whole thing right now, and I probably will be forever. But it creates, it's moving so quickly, and you read so much new stuff. It creates this whirlwind around me. I'm always trying to be calmer and, you know, more centered, and it's harder in this vortex of technology that we can access to do, you know, all kinds of stuff. It's nuts.
And you know what, Charles? That was actually one of the great things about writing this book with Kevin. At some point, you're like, no, this is the script. This is what we're going to stick to. And we had to keep each other on point several times that we were like, no, we're not going to add. I told Kevin several times, no, we're not going to add any more to the manuscript. And the great thing is, writing a book, because it needs to have at least 5 or 10 years of value. So you really need to think about the fundamentals of the whirlwind that we're in. And I think writing the book really helped us both focus on what are the true fundamentals of the thing we're going through right now. What is hype and what is true?
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a final coda here, I do remember the book, and I actually have a copy of it, but I just never. I had to really. You had to really kick my brain to get me to remember it. But I was looking through a file cabinet of old global learning resource things, and I saw that book in there, and I totally forgot about it. I have to go, when we're done here, I'm going to go try to find it.
Me too. I pulled it out of the attic when I was finding a bunch of books that I was going through. So anyway, well, good stuff. So let everyone, I mean, both of you all are pretty active on LinkedIn, just as we all are, and often, and they're well networked, and always amazed and impressed by the network that you guys have. So beyond that, is there, it's like I ask people, how do people follow you? And they all say LinkedIn. And I'm like, why am I even asking this question? But it's perfunctory as part of my job here. So last minute pitch, where to find you and what you're working on.
Well, if I can do a shout out here for all your listeners, one of the bucket list items that's still on my list is I want to be a professional speaker at an American conference. I actually had 4 out of 6 continents now, but the US is still lacking. So just get me over there in the US as well and get me on a stage. You can meet me in real life.
I'll help you, because I've been wanting to speak overseas a lot. I've only done it twice, once in Amsterdam and once in with Kevin in Australia. I think a couple times in Australia, actually. So I want to get over there too. I love to travel. So anyway, you help me, I'll try to help you, Kevin. What about you?
For me, just subscribe to my free newsletter, FOTnews.futureoftalent.org. I know that's a big mouthful, but FOTnews.futureoftalent.org, or just look for Future of Talent newsletter or whatever. Future of Talent weekly.
I can endorse that. I get it, and I've been getting it for a long time, and it's really good. So awesome. Thank you all so very much for your time and for sharing the book. And of course, the book, I would say the same thing, but I'm sure it's available on Amazon. No? Yes, of course it is.
Yes, it is. Yes. Yep. Yeah, it's available on Amazon and on many other, including Target in the US and sites in the UK and Europe as well.
Nice. There we go. As we wind down today's episode, dear listeners, I want to remind you to check out our website, rockethire.com, and learn more about our latest line of business, which is auditing and advising on AI-based hiring tools and talent assessment tools. Take a look at the site. There's a really awesome FAQs document around New York City Local Law 144 that should answer all your questions about that complex and untested piece of legislation. And guess what? There's going to be more to come, so check us out. We're here to help.